Hi, this is David Filippo, the left-handed right-winger again. And I'm talking about, kind of continue on where we left off with the presidents. Number 27 out of the 44. So we're getting into mediocre territory, but not the worst, but kind of passive ones. Again, John Adams is mostly remembered for what he did during the American Revolution. I mean, he drafted the Declaration of Independence. They'll pass it off to Thomas Jefferson, who really took all the credit. And he wanted it that way. I don't think he thought himself as that great of a writer. As president, John Adams did have some big shoes to fill because following after George Washington. So he was in a tough spot. But he did, I'll give him credit where credit is due, and I'll start with the good stuff first. A historical event called the XYZ Affair, where essentially during the war France was having with Great Britain, so Americans happened to be there, and we were subjected to a bribe to kind of choose sides. And it was kind of insulting. A lot of people were upset about how dare they do that to us. And Adams did the right thing. We didn't really have much of a Navy yet, but he really made the Navy into a big thing and sent the Navy out against them. And in a way, it was good, too, because it never became a full-blown war, known as a quasi-war, but it was very short-lived. It might have been less than a year. I think it was just enough to show the force. Oh, they got scared, they backed off. What really hurt Adams was essentially what followed after the XYZ Affair was his decision to support and sign to law the Alien and Sedition Acts. Now, the Alien Act does have some points that I can sort of relate to, because it was pretty much making it illegal for any foreigner to come into the country and denounce incoming presidents or interfere in our politics. So in theory, it sounds good, but what it did for a lot of people, it felt like it was very anti-immigrant, turned anyone who legally wanted to come out of the country, which is something I oppose as well. So it's unfortunate that was the route that I'm stuck with that one. Then there's the Sedition Act, and the Sedition is probably the worst of all, but it pretty much said anyone who talks out against the government, or politically against the government, because it came to a divided politics, was essentially breaking the law. And there were actually people criminalized and gone to jail for speaking out against John Adams, the Federalists. And admittedly, that was their goal. They was indirectly trying to say, hey, let's stop the Republican or Democratic Republican opposition by just making it illegal for them to talk about the government. So it was really a bad moment for him. But it was one of those things that got quickly forgotten. Luckily, Thomas Jefferson, who we'll talk about in later videos, was a really good president. Essentially, it was called the Revolution of 1800 when he beat him in 1800 because Thomas Jefferson went out of his way to erase the Alien and Sedition Acts and kind of clean up all that stuff that Adams had put in place. So it's a shame. I think Adams, in theory and principle, could have been a decent president, but on the wrong side of politics. Anyway, the next one I want to talk about is Herbert Hoover. Kind of a gap. Goes from 27 to 26. Herbert Hoover, I think, in some ways got a bum rap because he was president during the Great Depression, actually when it started. The stock market crashed in 1929, shortly after he'd been inaugurated as president. So it kind of just fell in his lap. And he often got the blame for it. It didn't hurt. It didn't help the fact that he was a Republican. The Republican Party had been in power since 1921 with Warren G. Harding, and then, so I would talk about another video, and eventually another video I'm going to talk about Calvin Coolidge. So it looked like his fault. He did it. He's the reason why we're in this economic depression. But he did a lot of things that Franklin Delano Roosevelt would copy in later years, which, I mean, I could be, because I wasn't crazy about a lot of what he did. But I think they were more, in some ways, conservative-minded. Like, he was very controlled of the spending of it. And that's a problem, too. Sometimes when you're trying to help, it's hard to, ensure that the money's there. 'Cause a lot of it's on hope and people's generosity, and depending how generous they are, it's not always effective. And I think that's what hurt him. A lot of his ideas were, like, he was hoping that a lot of the big businesses would donate back or give money back into other situations and help people. And it didn't kind of work too well. There wasn't enough. There wasn't enough to go around. They weren't giving enough back. And something more needs to be done. and really and he could have been okay at that. I mean, I probably may have given him a little few more points, but he falls down here. Is his decision to use tear gas on veterans. So anyway, what was there was what called the bonus army. These veterans from World War I who wanted to get their bonus payments paid to them early. They weren't scheduled to get it right away, but they wanted it. I mean, it's depression, struggling. They want it. Hoover decided to have General Douglas MacArthur send troops out and they throw tear gas on these veterans to get them to disperse. A lot of people hurt. I'm sure from everything, people died. It was just kind of a horrible thing to happen. Bad move on his part, so it really puts him in a bad spot for me. But that's that. Moving on next now to number 25, which or rather 24, John F. Kennedy. Coincidentally, when I believe it was either 63 or 64, not long after his presidency, Herbert Hoover died. He was actually one of the longest living presidents. And he died during or just after the presidency of John F. Kennedy. Go figure. Anyway, with Kennedy, it's interesting because he had some it's tough to judge where he is, because I think a lot of people, when the fact that he was assassinated, his popularity rose. I mean, having Lincoln, we'll probably talk about later on, he was kind of hated at the time. Someone tried to kill him, boom, superstar. It's kind of sad it works out that way. But that's the thing I got with Kennedy. I was the other way around, too. I'm generally a person who not really crazy about people that are cheaters. I can overlook in other areas, but politically, Kennedy and I would probably disagree on a lot of things, and that Marilyn Monroe and all those other things probably wouldn't have tied me too well. But he was a proponent for lower taxes. He was an enemy of the Federal Reserve, so I'm going to say that's maybe why he was a target for assassination. I mean, we don't know, and there's still some debate, and that's what I do find interesting about him is still a lot of debate as to who or why he was assassinated. I don't think we'll ever really know the truth as to why it happened. On that, not a whole lot happened to really make or break, so that's why it's almost at the middle, 25. It's almost the halfway point. 24 is kind of the half, 24, 25 is kind of the halfway point. Or not quite at 50 yet, but we're getting there. Because, make or break, he's got some nice things here, some bad things there. He really is the kind of the epitome of mediocre for this series. So, he fits there well. There's not a lot bad to say about him, but not a lot of great either. And he was unfortunately part of a very horrible situation that happened to him. But moving on, we'll then jump back in time again. We're going to now number 24, 25, now 24. John Quincy Adams, son of John Adams. And he could have had a great presidency, but unfortunately, the way the election went, some argue there was a corrupt bargain. Essentially, there wasn't a majority in the Electoral College. So the way it works is that the vote would go to the House of Representatives. Well, one of the candidates, Henry Clay, who didn't quite have enough votes to make it for the House of Representatives election, was also in the same National Republican, eventually Whig party that Quincy Adams was. So naturally, he was able to turn the House to vote for Adams. Then naturally, he was awarded, became Secretary of State. There's no evidence for sure if that's the case, but it does make you wonder something was going on there. So essentially, as president, John Quincy couldn't really get anything done. Politically, I mean, there's a lot of viewpoints I would agree with. I think he wasn't quite of the Federalist as his father. He was somewhere down in the middle, which made him a decent man. Politically, later on, he would be a very hardcore advocate against slavery. Big guy on the, what we call getting rid of the gag rule, which essentially made it a crime for a congressman. Well, not really a crime, but congressmen couldn't talk about slavery, period. He made it open so they could start talking about it, which opened up the debate. Could argue led to civil war, but he brought it out there as a problem. We could, credit him in some respects for bringing about the end of slavery because of his actions. So that's about it for there. I was able to get through 4 of them. And we'll continue on with 23 and so on in the next one. Thanks.